Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. We got a big show today on a band that been around for as long as I've been, almost as long as I've been alive, and they're still out there doing it. And of course, I'm talking about the Rolling Stones. So they got quite a few albums. I think they're up around 30. So I have myself and my partners here, and we scoured all the records and listened to them, and we've come up with a list of our favorite 5 Rolling Stones records. And to share in that endeavor and to talk about the Stones, we have our friend Martin.
Yeah, how you doing, Hack?
Good, good. And Mr. Pardo, how are you, sir?
What's going on, guys? How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Doing good. Doing good.
Good, good.
Frantically trying to get ready.
Yeah. Well, we figured. Yeah, I figured. Well, let me still. When he gets here, we'll pop him in. Not a problem.
Yeah.
So, So just a couple of words. I mean, we all found out about Christine McVie today. That was extremely sad. She was, incredible talent, incredible songwriter, great voice, great player, and the most surprising thing is I had absolutely no idea she was 79 years old. That really freaked me out.
I didn't either. Yeah.
That was crazy, but it doesn't matter, right? She's gone. But rest in peace, Christine McVie. Another one of our heroes, right?
I'm literally just finding this out from you guys right now. So,
is that right?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she passed away earlier today.
Hmm.
Okay, so anyways, we're here to talk Stones. Now, usually I start this by asking, what was your first exposure to the Rolling Stones? But I mean, I was thinking about that question for myself. I'm like, they've kind of always been around. Like there was never like, oh, I discovered this band. It's like they were always there. Ever since I can we're listening to music, the Rolling Stones were around. So I don't know what's your experience with the Stones, Martin?
Well, I love the idea that they've always been there, and they're literally as old as I am. Pretty much exactly, right? 63, 64, 62. I don't know exactly the start date of the Stones, but yeah, they've been there my whole life. But yeah, when I think back to it being just like an exclusive, uncompromising metalhead, even though they were there, they were easy to ignore for a lot of years as a kid. But I think I started getting caught up in the excitement a little bit around Some Girls into Emotional Rescue, and then I remember first year university. It was like, remember 1981 was, I think that was a big Doors revival year, but also the Stones were pretty celebrated when Tattoo You came out, and everybody was, all excited about the Stones again. So I remember that up and down the dorm rooms at UBC, it was that record being played over and over again. So that's when I was really, truly on board.
Yeah. 81. I mean, that was a lot of those bands from that era. Like the Who came back real strong then too. That was the first of their farewell tours, I believe, was around that time, right? Yeah. What about yourself, Pete?
I hated them for most of my life.
Yeah.
they were like one of my most despised bands all throughout like the late 70s and all throughout the 80s. Wow. I mean, I went to see him on Steel Wheels tour in 89 at the old Shea Stadium. And the only reason I went is I was working at this company on Long Island, and a bunch of guys I work with like, oh, you want to go see the Stones? They're coming around, big show at Shea Stadium. And I was like, I'll go. I don't much care. I was like, I don't really like them, but I'll go. To me, I was 23 years old. I figured it was an excuse to go hang out with the guys I work with and get drunk somewhere, right? So we literally all piled in a car, drove to Shea. I got completely hammered, and the show was kind of fun, I guess, but I really didn't didn't pay a lot of attention to what was going on. Living Color, I enjoyed because I was, they were new at the time. But it wasn't until probably the mid '90s that I discovered that I actually was starting to like the music of the Stones, because I really couldn't stand them beforehand. And now I absolutely love them. I've been a huge fan for probably 25 years. And, what was I fighting all that time? I don't know. They didn't fit the mold of what I was listening to. They weren't heavy enough. They weren't metal enough. They were too old, right? They couldn't play their instruments. I mean, all the shit you say as a kid, right? When you're a metal fan, you're like, oh, but he can't play like Yngwie, and Keith is so sloppy and Mick's not a good singer. And now I'm like, I don't agree with any of that stuff.
It's funny. It reminds me of that old joke that when a man reaches 50, he suddenly gets interested in World War II. Same kind of thing. Eh?
Yeah. Well, that happens. So, but yeah, now I respect the hell out of them, and man, their longevity and all the great songs and albums. And yeah, I was a stupid kid. What can I tell you?
No, you know what? It's like similar to yourself. They were always kind of there, but they weren't the Scorpions, and they weren't Kiss, and they weren't Led Zeppelin, and it's like, so they're just kind of always there in the background, and you hear the odd song on the radio, and you're like, that's not a bad song. It's kind of catchy, but it's not heavy, and it's not until years later, like yourself, and then you start listening to it, and it's like, you start getting into some of the songwriting and really getting an appreciation for what these guys were doing. And going back and listening to these guys and going through their catalog, man, they have such a unique style of playing. They're sloppy as hell. They're loose, it's like the song it's going to fall apart at any minute, but it somehow still has a bit of a swing and a groove to it. It's like a jam thing, but it works, and the way Charlie Watts playing the drums, he's like the only guy kind of holding it together, but it works. I mean, it's worked for I don't know how many years, since the 63.
Yeah,
I mean,
years, yeah.
And I mean, and like, these guys have written some fantastic music. So,
what else too? I got to give credit to Martin Scorsese, because he featured them heavily in Goodfellas, which I was really into at the time, and I was kind of like, wow, this shit rocks. I'm like, what am I missing? Right? This is not Angie. This is not some of the lighter stuff that I was used to hearing all the time on the radio. And
everything rocks in a movie, though, right? It's like look how much bigger a car looks when it's actually in the showroom, right?
Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
Yeah. I remember that Johnny Depp movie, Blow, and they started playing that "Can You Hear Me Knocking?"
Yeah.
And talk about perfect placement, right?
Great song too. Yeah,
great song. All right, so with that in mind, then let's go through our list. So I guess we'll go Martin, and then Pete, and then myself. So we're picking our top 5. So Martin, what's your number 5?
All right, my number 5. I usually have this higher, and it's an odd choice. But Pete and I did a show once about how I'm very predictable, how everything's from the late 70s that I like more for bands, and it really and really sometimes they're not big popular choices. So I'm going with Black and Blue from 1977. I always loved the production of it. It's so pristine and clean sounding. And I like Hot Stuff. Hand of Fate's great. Cherry O Baby, and Memory Motel is my favorite ballad they basically ever did. Side 2, it falls down a little bit. But yeah, I like Hey Negrita as well. Fool to Cry is a good ballad on there. So yeah, I always put this in. We could almost do an episode. Bluish Occult Mirrors is a Blue album cover, right? I did a Blue album cover. That's right. I did a podcast episode on this where I was including like Foreigner's second album, right, and Police's second album, right, and so all of these kind of Blue album covers in this time, whatever. But this time, for some reason, I just really like when like a lot of bands falling into that 77, 78. I don't know why it is. I'm just into these albums, but it's an album that's respected out there, but not super loved, right? But yeah, and again, like Bluish Occult Mirrors, which a lot of people put down, I think this is one of the best sounding Stones albums.
Yeah. We'll get into production a little bit, because I'm going to refer to that as my number 5. Okay, Pete, what do you got for number 5?
So I totally get what Martin's saying because, and this is the exact conversation he and I had in that episode. We were talking about how Martin tends to favor a lot of stuff from that latter period in the 70s, and I go for the earlier part of the 70s. And my Stones picks are pretty much right alongside that, with the exception of this one. My number 5 comes from Martin's era here. Some Girls, number 5 for me.
Okay.
This is the only one that's going to appear on my list that's not from that coveted, like, 69 to 74 era type of thing. Great comeback album and a really fun album. Very much a product of the late 70s. You know, you have lots of rhythm and blues and disco and funk things going on here. But man, just some great songs. I mean, Miss You is great. Imagination is great. Shattered, Some Girls, the title track, Beast of Burden, a lot of classics on here. This is probably my favorite album with Ronnie Wood on it, even though they're all really solid. But and this ironically is the first Stones album I ever heard. Back when I couldn't stand them, because I remember my cousins were big into the Stones, and I was like, this is no good. I don't like this. I'd rather go listen to Kiss. But actually, all these years later, it stands the test of time. So that's my number 5, Some Girls from 78.
Cool. So I'm also going to be out of that era. I'm going to go with Tattoo You for my number 5. This was like when this album came out. I mean, 81. They were at their zenith. That's when they were playing these absolutely monster stadiums and the big screens and the whole 9 yards, and Mick running around with his football jersey outfit on and whatever. But I mean, Start Me Up, opening track. It's one of those songs that gets played to death. We play it at my bar band, and it always goes over really well. People love that song. Hang Fire is cool. One of my favorite songs. Actually, one of my top 5 songs is on here too. I love Little TNA. I mean, that guitar riff is so freaking cool, and Keith's vocals on that are really, really awesome. Neighbors is great. Tops, I think that song is a hidden gem on this album. Amongst all the other great tracks. Waiting on a Friend, of course, is on this. Really, really cool. It's an 81 album, but it's got a 70s feel. And then I kind of went and did a little bit of research on it. And the reason why it sounds like an earlier 70s record is apparently this record was pieced together from bits that they had recorded that were unfinished in the earlier 70s. And because at the time, Mick and Keith were at war, right? So they weren't getting together to write anything. So they just kind of went through all this and finished it all up, polished it up, and it turned into an absolutely fantastic record. The only song, there's a song on, Slave that's on this, right? Slave has such an amazing riff. I wish they, it seems unfinished. I mean, there's no real verse to it. If Mick sat down and wrote some verses and along with that chorus, I think it would have been a much better song. But not that it's not, but it's just kind of repetitive with, But I mean, apart from that, it's a great album, and it's probably, I think, the first album of theirs because it got so much radio play that really developed the earworm in me for the Stones back then. So yeah, that's my number 5. Oh, and production, this album sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, this album to Fender guitars is what Back in Black is to Gibson. The Fender tones on this, those telly tones, are amazing. Like, this is such a good sounding record. The guitars especially sound phenomenal on this record. So I have to throw that in. All right. Okay. What do we got for number 4, Martin?
Well, my number 4 is Tattoo You, and I usually have this number 2, and even in my notes I had it number 2, but I called an audible after just kind of looking at it in a little bit of a harsher light. I mean, like I say, it's usually my number 2. I love side 1. Start Me Up is probably in my top 2 or 3 of those hard rock and boogie songs that they do, right? Hang Fire is just like a super kind of happy. They don't have a lot of, well, I guess it's somewhat in their wheelhouse, but Hang Fire is amazing too. So it starts out with 2 of the greatest Stone songs, I think. And Little TNA, I love a Keith vocal, and I love his Talk Is Cheap album. Wow. But yeah, that's my favorite song on the album. I just love when he does a vocal. Black Limousine's pretty good. I usually don't like that kind of song, but it's but it's fine. It moves along. It's got enough critical mass, and it's kind of got a happy melody to it as well. Neighbors, kind of a punky one, not crazy about that, but a lot of side two. I agree with you on Tops. And Waiting on a Friend is absolutely amazing. That's one of my favorite Stone songs as well. It's funny you mentioned the production, and it's interesting to hear you talk about it from a guitar point of view, because I've never thought of this album as a great sounding album, but I have no idea what the guitars sound like. I never really think of that when I think of production. I think, I'm very simple on production. Does it have enough bass? Does it have enough treble? Right. That's what production means to me. Right. And this one, it's never stood out that way to me. Like when I hear those drums opening on the Black and Blue album, I go, wow, I mean, this is like really pristine. Right. But yeah, so yeah, few songs on side two. I had knocked this down, so I called it audible number 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the Fender Telecaster and Strat. They sound perfect on this. So I mean, my ears, I'm always listening for guitars, right? That's my whole thing. All right, what do you got for number 4, Pete?
All right, so we're moving into my Stones wheelhouse right now. So I'm going to go with 1970. What year is this again? 1973's Goat's Head Soup. So we're in the Mick Taylor years. That's how I got into the Stones. The Mick Taylor era is what sold me on this band. Finally, I love these albums with him on it. I think he is just an absolutely terrific guitar player, easily the best guitar player this band has ever had. And you talk about the Fender tones. Now you got the Les Paul tones. Woo-hoo! Great songs on here. This is, I think, an underrated album. Some people shit on this album. I absolutely love it. Dancing with Mr. D is so cool and funky and mysterious. 100 Years Ago is great. I love Winter. Star is terrific. Coming Down Again, Heartbreaker, just so good. Angie, I love this album. I love the sound of it. I love the songs. I love the playing on it. Mick is singing up a storm on this one. And, horrible cover notwithstanding, I think this is a great album. So it's number 4 for me.
Yeah, more on that later. But yeah, my number 4 is 1968 Beggar's Banquet. I am a huge fan of Keith playing acoustic guitar, and acoustic guitar is all over this record. It's their acoustic album, right? Yeah. I forgot my graphic. There we go. I got all this big production and I don't use it. Anyways, yeah, I mean, apart from the obvious, Sympathy for the Devil and Street Fighting Man, No Expectation, really nice slide guitar on there. Brian Jones, he was, I mean, on those early albums, he was the guy that played sort of that accompaniment or that part or that instrument that kind of elevated the song. In this case, it was some slide guitar. The country tinge Dear Doctor is cool. Parachute Woman is a great acoustic blues. What else? Oh, for me, the gem on this record, though, is Jigsaw Puzzle. Bill Wyman's bass on that is so good, man. And, and plus it's got some really good slide on that as well. That time, I believe Keith played that. Straight Cat Blues, Killer, that's an electric song, but most of this is acoustic. Prodigal Son is a cool cover. Factory Girl. I love Factory Girl. I love the instrumentation on it, congas, tabla, violin, mandolin, all that to complement it and just to elevate that song. Really good. Salt of the Earth, the little bit of Keith and then a lot of Mick singing on that. Beautiful acoustic song. I mean, the reason I like this album so much is because it's mainly acoustic, and like I said, I've always been a really big fan of Keith's acoustic playing, and it's this album, another one that just sounds so good. Those acoustic guitars, again, I always go to the guitar. They sound really nice on this record. Yeah. So there you go. Beggar's Banquet is my number 4. All righty. What's your number 3, Martin?
Great pick. I mean, I could have put that one in here too. I love that period of the band. It reminds me of that, the 2 Working Man's Dead and American Beauty, right? The whole Grateful Dead era of that sort of thing too. And I love the acoustic Rolling Stones for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great album. And even Satanic Majesties, I quite like a bit. But my number 3 is an album I didn't pay a lot of attention to for a lot of years. along with Goat's Head Soup, this era, Goat's Head Soup and It's Only Rock and Roll. I went with It's Only Rock and Roll. As I go through it, I just realize it's so solid. I love all the songs on it. If You Can't Rock Me is a good, rockin' heavy one, more or less Stones heavy, but it's got my favorite pre-chorus that they ever do, which is really cool. Ain't Too Proud to Beg is the only cover on it, but I'm fine with that as well. I love Till the Next Time We Till the Next Goodbye. Time Waits for No One as well. It's Only Rock and Roll is just, as you mentioned, Hack, the whole groovy and slinkiness. I think that's their best song for that. So that's a great classic as well. Dance Little Sister, not so much. Short and Curly is pretty cool. Fingerprint File, murky kind of R&B. It's okay. So as we move into the other side, less so again, a little bit like Tattoo You, but I just realized it has mathematically, it has really strong songs for me. I love this sort of as I like that later period, this reminds me of the whole Who by Numbers sort of period. The whole the world's, it seems like the world's starting to turn on the Stones a little bit at this point. They're going through a lull where they're not welcome in the world as much. So it felt like that after Exile, which was well regarded. But then I feel like they were kind of like, cast aside for 3 albums until Some Girls kind of brings them back, sort of thing. So yeah, this feels like a little bit of the Stones are kind of like the third wheel during, this very middle of the 70s, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think they were taking a back seat to Zeppelin at this point in time, right? Not the Zeppelin were kind of looked at as the world's greatest rock and roll band for a bunch of years.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. All right, what do you got for number 3, Pete?
I do want to mention before I get to my number 3 that I think Mick Taylor's greatest guitar solo of all time is on It's Only Rock and Roll. Time Waits for No One is absolutely spectacular. One of the most beautiful guitar solos I've ever heard. So just wanted to throw that out there. All right, in my haste to join the show tonight, and the reason I did, guys, something was wrong with my Facebook, and it was not loading my instant messages. I'm like, how am I going to get the link?
Oh, so right.
I forgot to grab my number 3, which is Exile on Main Street from 1972, the double album. I used to, for many years, when I first started getting into the Stones, I didn't really get Exile. And I was kind of like, it's kind of really bluesy and folky and country. And, I wasn't really digging it. And I know everybody loves it and claims it's like their masterpiece. And it wasn't until like maybe about a decade ago where I guess it was they released that DVD or whatever that told the whole story of Exile. And I went and read a couple of books about, them being in France and recording it and all the shenanigans that went on, and realized just how like epic an album and period in time in the history of the Rolling Stones. I mean, the fact that you can write a whole book on 1972 at Chilcot in France when they were recording this album makes it like almost legendary to me now. And I think there's some great songs on here. I think it's, in a weird way, it's almost like a Keith solo album. And it kind of feels that way. You could tell he was as messed up as he was during this period. He's the guy, I think, who was there day in and day out working on the songs and all that. And it kind of shows, and and that's why I really like it now, because it's got more of his influence on it. And I mean, great songs. Rocks Off is great. Rip This Joint is great. Sweet Virginia is terrific. Lovin' Cup, Tumbling Dice, great rock song. Happy is such a killer song. Ventilator Blues. I mean, a lot of great songs on here. It's rootsy. It's kind of like, country rock. Stones doing the country rock at times. A lot of acoustic stuff on here. I dig it. It's a really fun album. It's like one of my favorite albums to play, like in the summertime, like out by the pool and stuff. You got a bunch of people over. Throw in Exile. Everybody gets into it.
Yeah, for sure. All righty. So my number 3, Goat's Head Soup, 1972. Fantastic record, man. I don't know why this doesn't get more love. Dancing with Mr. D, great riff and a great opener. 100 years ago, dig that electric piano on there. Mick Taylor lead playing on it. It's cool, funky. It's, Coming Down Again. Keith singing a ballad. Who knew? Hey, why not? Oh man, another one of my top 5 Stones tunes. Four Dues, Heartbreaker. It's gotta be one of my top 5. When the horns come in there, man, that just puts that song over the edge. It's fantastic, and Mick can write some lyrics. Lyrics to that are really good. And again, man, the whole acoustic guitar thing. Angie is on this. I absolutely love Keith's playing, and it really shines here. It's just that is like the perfect song. I mean, it's got lyrically it's great, melodically, all the parts, the piano parts, the strings, it's a beautiful arrangement. That's like them at their peak songwriting right there, that song, Angie. Silver Train, cool blues. Winter, I love Winter. It's got some beautiful guitar work again from Mick Taylor on that. And the last song I'm going to mention is Star Star, with all those Chuck Berry licks. That's all Keith doing the Chuck Berry thing. um, lyrics to that song are really cool, and the main guitar solo, that the Mick Taylor solo on that song is also amazing. And like, again, the recording, the sound on this record, it just sounds beautiful. They're all their records. I didn't find one record that I'm like, they all sounded really, really good. I mean, these guys were playing, you know, state of the art studios back in the day, all over the world, right? So their record should sound good, and they all do. And yeah, Goat's Head Soup is fantastic. Yeah, and Mick Taylor, man, just like you say, Pete, best guitar player they ever had, hands down. Yeah. Alrighty, so we're down to number 2. So it's going quick.
Okay, so for me, Exile on Main ST. It's not Street, right? It's just ST, right? And I love it to death. And Pete knows that we all are. We're all suckers for double albums, right? Double albums are really important, seeming and sounding and all this. But yeah, to me, this seems like the more authentic and worn in version of Beggar's Banquet. I love side 2. Side 2 is kind of the most country and mellow and acoustic side. All that stuff's good, and rocks off. What a great opener on side 1. Rip This Joint. Yeah, Tumbling Dice. Who can deny that? That's in your start me up, and it's only rock and roll sort of feel. But and Happy with Keith singing again. Very cool. So yeah, I just love the way that this all hangs together. It seems like it really seems like the history of American music. I mean, it seems like this really weighty encyclopedia of the last 50 years before this of music, right? And that's really cool about it as well. So again, what my second favorite era of Grateful Dead is that American Beauty, Working Man's Dead sort of era, and this feels a lot like that. But I do like the way that it's a slightly more amped up and cluttered in a good way version of Beggar's Banquet, and it sounds better. It sounds warmer, put it that way, than that record. So yeah, my number 2, which is a very critically acclaimed album. It should be high up the list, and it usually is high up the list. So yeah, there you go.
All right, Pete, number 2.
Let's go to 1969, Let It Bleed. One of the craziest covers of all time.
Yeah.
What in the world? Martin, I think we featured this on one of our album covers episodes.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, where do you start with this one? This is just so amazing. Midnight Rambler, Give Me Shelter, which arguably for me could be the greatest Rolling Stones song of all time. You got the Silver, Can't Always Get What You Want, Monkey Man. I mean, how hard rocking is that? Live With Me is great. Love in Vain, title track. I mean, it's just a classic late 60s album. British rock and roll doesn't get much better than this. Crazy looking album cover notwithstanding. But yeah, this is basically the arrival of Mick Taylor and the Stones, and all of us, you can hear the differences. I mean, just the level of musicianship just went up a notch, and songs that stand the test of time. It would be my number 1 if it wasn't for my number 1, which I think is even more amazing than this one. So there you have it.
Nice. All right. So my number 2 is this guy. Talk about album covers.
Yeah.
Sticky Fingers, 1971. Another great opener. I love albums that open strong, and this one's Brown Sugar. I mean, I've heard it too many times, but it's a cool tune. Sway has a nice southern rock feel to it. Cool tune. Some great Mick Taylor playing on this again. The tag out on that song is fantastic. Wild Horses, another acoustic song. I'm a sucker for these acoustic tunes, man. The pairing of Mick Taylor and Keith doing the complimentary acoustic parts is just beautiful. Can't You Hear Me Knocking? Oh, that is one of my favorite riffs of all times. It is so absolutely so cool. And that jam at the end. Now, I've read that jam was completely improvised, but man, it sounds like it's rehearsed because it's structured. Everybody comes in, comes out. It's got dynamics. It's absolutely fantastic, that jam. Bitch. Great tune. We used to cover Bitch. Fun song to play. Horns again. When the horns come in, that song just, sails. I got the blues, gospel, bluesy feel to that one. Um, you know, uh, the Stones, they had that thing where they kind of really mixed up styles. They've got a little bit of country, a little bit of funk at times, some gospel. They kind of mix it up with the blues rock. It's a nice little stew that they have on certain songs. It's like sound really cool. Um, I love the Billy Preston. He's on this, and the solo he plays on "I Got the Blues" is very cool. Um, and the last song I'm going to mention is "Dead Flowers." I love "Dead Flowers," man. That is
Amazing.
a cool song. The lyrics are fantastic. I like Mick's sort of mock country type singing voice that he uses on that. That's just a classic country send up. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's just a great song. "Dead Flowers" is amazing. And yeah, Sticky Fingers is my number 2.
I will say that the live version of Dead Flowers on the Ladies and Gentlemen Meet the Rolling Stones concert film from the 72 tour, I think it was, is absolutely mind-blowingly good.
Yeah.
If you heard it, check it out.
Yeah, I got to check that out. Cool. All right, we're down to our number 1s.
Okay, so my number 1 is Some Girls, June 9th, 1978, 6 times platinum. So this is the big comeback album for them, right? This is like they're super celebrated. They're hanging out in New York. Every time I think of this album, I think of them in a club in New York, right? Yeah. New York was a super exciting time. The city was just like brimming with art and music and punk and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, even like their haircuts at this time, right? Even like their clothes, everything about them at this time. It's just the most, it seems like the Stones as being the most approachable and part of the world. And it's very upbeat. It's a comedic album. Anything that's rocking on here, it sounds like they're playing in a little matchbox, that thing the Stones do where they just sound like the smallest band in the world, right? Everything about them just seems like cramped up and like claustrophobic, right? So, things like When the Whip Comes Down fits that perfectly. Lies, I'd say. And yeah, not a very heavy album. I mean, Miss You is their famous, it's just a perfectly fine, shot at disco, but just a really sort of dressed down casual sort of disco, right? And Love, just My Imagination. Some Girls is like a country tune. Faraway Eyes is like a country tune. Respectable is another rocker. So even when they're like rocking out a little bit on this, it reminds you a little bit of just that punk, hunger of the street sort of thing on this album. Beast of Burden's another great ballad, and Shattered's probably my favorite Stone song of all time. They never ever made another song like that. It's just so weird and funny. Everything about it, yeah, mixed vocal on it. It's they have no other songs even remotely like that in the catalog. But yeah, the rest of it is just great song after great song in all these different styles, and it's just all so kind of approachable. There's nothing murky or really feeling druggy about it or anything like that. There's nothing dark about anything on this album. It's actually probably their funniest album, right? In so many ways. So yeah, and it just, again, a magical time just watching everybody be excited about this band, even though I wasn't really that excited about them, but I was kind of starting to warm to them in 1978. So I would have been 15 at the time. So
Right, right. All right, Pete, number one. What do you got?
Yeah, Martin, I would have no issue with calling Some Girls Their Fun album because it really is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number one for me can only be Sticky Fingers. Top to bottom, just amazing. And whether I've heard some of these songs, a bit much, doesn't matter. Brown Sugar is still great. The deep cuts on here, though, are the great
Yes.
songs. I mean,
Yes.
Sway is a killer song that nobody ever
Yes.
talks about.
Yep.
Sister Morphine rules. Dead Flowers rules. I Got the Blues. Bitch is such a great hard rocking song. I totally agree with you. You got these heavy riffs with the horns right next to them. It works
Love it.
so well. Can't You Hear My Knocking is a great epic. Just such a great Moonlit Mile is awesome way to end the album. It's kind of like got this kind of introspective, kind of like atmospheric, just like you just picture yourself sitting staring at it. It's great album, great performances, great vocals, the whole 9 yards. Love the production on it. This to me is a classic rock album, right? I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. So yeah, number one without a question for me.
Yep. It is a fantastic record. All right. So my number one is Dirty Work. No, I'm kidding.
Primitive Cool.
Primitive Cool. Yeah.
Jagger
No,
solo.
my number one. It's Only Rock and Roll, 1974. For me, this record, I love that whole sort of I'm a rock star god attitude thing. I mean, look at the cover. Like everybody's just, they're walking down the stairs. Everybody's just like worshiping them, get out of my way, clear the way for the Stones. I love the attitude on this record. I mean, and it starts with the very first song. If you can't rock me, somebody will. And I love the sound. I don't know what they did to Mick's voice on that. They made his voice sound a little more ballsy and aggressive. They did something to his vocal track there, but the swagger of it. I just love the swagger. It's that whole '70s I'm a rock god thing. I love that whole thing, and But that's a great song to start. For me, the downer is "Ain't Too Proud to Beg." Like, come on, what are you doing? Like, put another original song on there or do something. For me, that sort of you start off on this high point and then you throw in that cover. For me, that's kind of a down point. But you got It's Only Rock and Roll on this. That has got to be probably the perfect Rolling Stones song. It's loose, it's funky. It's got that great hooky chorus, and it's just it epitomizes their whole style. That one song, I think. Till the Next Goodbye, another beautiful acoustic tune with a little country tinge. Great song. Time Waits for No One is my favorite on this record. That's got to be one of my top five. Pete, you mentioned it earlier. Mick Taylor. Those melody lines, those lead lines he's playing, it's just absolutely stellar. It just sends this song right over the top. Fantastic. I love that song a lot. What else did I write here? Luxury. Luxury, a fun song. Love the lyrics to that. Dance Little Sister. Straight up old time boogie woogie rock and roll with some nice Mick Taylor licks again. That main solo. Again, there's that solo from Mick Taylor. If You Really Want to Be My Friend. I call that the Meatloaf song. Big production. Again, the solo is fantastic. And the last song I'm going to mention is Fingerprint File. That's their funk song. They're just starting to dabble a little bit into the funk kind of dance vibe a little bit there. Definitely a hidden gem, a sign of where they were heading eventually. And yeah, just a great record. I love that attitude. I love the swagger, the whole 9 yards. I'm a rock god and Part the Ways. Just love it. I love that record.
It's a shame Taylor didn't hang around longer, but
oh yeah,
he went on record saying if I would have stayed in that band any longer, I would have been dead. So.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. But yeah, there you go. So what do you all? Let's go, Martin. Anything coming up? Any books? Anything to mention to the folks while you're in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one quick comment. This is one of those bands where I think if someone said, I'm going to take away all your Stones albums, you can only have 3, right? I
Yeah.
would probably pick the last 3 because I know they're good. And I know I haven't spent enough time with them, and I know they put a lot of work into them. And I think, this is a band that really spread out over time. So I actually think those records are better than Undercover, Dirty Work, even Steel Wheels. I think the stuff they did at the end, where they really haven't given us enough records for a long, long time, right? But I get more out of those than I do even from the '80s ones. So that's just something I want to mention. But yeah, books wise, I just got the Zeppelin in again. It came back into print, so the Zeppelin, all the albums, all the songs. Still have the Bowie. I bought a few more of that, so I've got copies of the new big plush Bowie book. And yeah, it's all at martinpopoff.com. We got the Contrarians video show, and then I have my weekly audio podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin.
Okay,
Popoff.
I have a link to Martin's website below if when he was interested in one of Martin's books. I have a few; they are really good. So there you go. What about yourself, Pete?
Well, first, I do want to say rest in peace to Christine McVie once again, because it's a huge, huge loss. And like you, Hack, I had no idea she was almost 80 years old already.
I know.
It shouldn't come as a surprise because, she joined Chicken Shack in like 68. So obviously she was up there. But yeah, for some reason, you look at Christine McVie over the years, and it's like, she'll never be 80 years old, right? She'll always look angelic, and, like 50 and crazy. Yeah, crazy. What's upcoming? Well, I will be joining these two gentlemen on Sunday. Well, it'll be airing on Sunday, but we will be ranking the albums of Clutch. Something's been in the works for quite a while. So we're actually getting together and doing that this week. So that'll be airing 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sea of Tranquility on Sunday. Martin and I will be doing a very interesting show Friday morning at the Funhouse on Sea of Tranquility, talking about kind of like those early songs that kind of possibly influenced thrash metal. So stuff from the 60s, the 70s, and maybe even the very, very early 80s, that where you can kind of hear where bands like Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer and Creator and Destruction and all those kind of bands maybe got some influence from those early sounds of thrash. So that's coming up on Friday. And just all sorts of other craziness throughout the week. And tomorrow I start my top 31 countdown, top 31 albums of 2022. So each day throughout the month of December, I'll be counting down my top 31 albums of the year. So tomorrow morning will be number 31, and on the 31st will be my album of the year. So if you want to join us, come on over to Sea Tranquility, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time each and every morning. I'll have a quick little video with another new album release from the year on my top 31. So other than that, that's what's happening.
Cool, and I have a link to Pete's channel below. We have 50 people in here, 51 now. I want to thank everybody for checking out the show. If you're coming in late, this will be up. You can watch the replay. If you're new to my channel, please thumbs up would be great to help support the channel, and think of subscribing. That'd be awesome. Could always use more subs to this channel, trying to grow this thing. And if you want to help support it other ways, there's links below there's Guitar Hack merch, there's hats like these, there's t-shirts, there's hoodies, there's mugs, lots of good stuff there. So yep, sporting the mug. So I want to thank these two gentlemen. Coming up on the channel in a couple of weeks, we're doing myself and my brother, we are cover band veterans. We do a cover band show once a month, usually sometime in the middle of the month. And then at the end of the month, we will be doing another album review. We'll talk about when we're going to be doing that, but we usually do these about once a month as well. And then there's some surprise Saturday night hangouts that I do. So look for a review of the latest Cult record. I've been asked to my thoughts on the Cult record, so I'll be doing a review on the Cult record probably in the next few days or so. So, anyways. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Please leave us with a thumbs up, and we will catch you next month. All right. Good night, everybody. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.